So, about 3 weeks later, I am 8 pounds heavier, got a little bit more hair on my chest, and my health is back to near peak condition, and this has been the case for at least a week. I am back to my sharp and overly energetic self. I did expect to get better, but I did not expect that it would go this fast. So, on my last video I asked the question, can you guess which nutrient I took out of my diet? The nutrient I took out of my diet to cause symptoms of so-called vegan malnourishment. And almost immediately people guessed it right. It's iodine. Vegan malnourishment? End-stage veganism? My firm buttocks, people. We already know what causes these issues, and to blame it on veganism is absurd and obsolete at this point. Today I'll tell you how iodine has affected my health, and I'll give you interesting information why not just vegans but everyone should take potassium iodine drops. For starters, iodine is extremely important for basic human health. It can be considered one of the most important regulators for bodily human functions. Without it, or without a sufficient supply, nothing, and I mean nothing, works as it should. From body temperature regulation to organ function, from bone formation to appetite control, from mental well-being to metabolic processes, iodine is extremely important, and I mean extremely important. Out of all the essential minerals and vitamins, it's arguably one of the most crucial elements for human health. To put it in perspective, boron, which I've talked about at length in the past, is important and often overlooked. Vitamin K2 is important and often overlooked. Chromium is important and often overlooked. These things are all lesser known nutrients, which many of us lack sufficient amounts of, yet those pale in comparison to the significance of iodine. Better yet, you can eat a diet that is sufficient in every nutrient, but if you miss iodine, you are severely sabotaging your health, well-being and results in the gym. It is that crucial. And yet, a deficiency of this mineral is extremely common, and no diet is inherently sufficient in the mineral. While Americans typically have sufficient amounts of iodine in their diet, which I assume comes mostly from heavily supplemented foods, for the rest of the world's population the deficiency rate of iodine is quite high and lies between 24 and 60%, with Europe being more deficient than even Africa. For those of you that don't know, let me give you a brief background to this video. I am a firm believer of plant-based nutrition. This mindset has received ridicule of an opposition to a degree that I can only describe as pure emotional zealotry. The opposition preaches the idea that plant foods are to blame for health issues, and what my philosophy proposes is that if you have issues with a plant-based diet, and especially plant foods in general, then the problem lies in either a dysfunctional method of applying plant-based nutrition, such as fruitarianism, an unbalanced diet, or it lies in an underlying deficiency that is not inherent to plant-based nutrition. And I think that those two alone account for 95% of failures of those who have followed or are following nutrition plans rich in plant foods. To prove that this is the case, I, as a person who has done well on a plant-based diet long term, I have made the conscious decision to alter my nutrition to an extent that would ensure that I would get the so-called classic symptoms of an inadequate plant-based diet. Or what this opposition proposes is the end result of any vegan diet. I did this in order to prove that veganism itself has nothing to do with bad results for most vegans, and you can indeed do your diet wrong. I know no one wants to hear that, but yeah, grow up, you little children. You are not incapable to making mistakes. Learn and own up to them. Anyway, in the first 2 weeks that I started introducing iodine back into my diet, I gained 8 pounds while barely increasing my exercise routine. Now, it's a part of that volume from all the food that I'm eating, because I'm suddenly have a better appetite. Sure, but I definitely gained noticeable muscle mass in a matter of weeks. Next to that, my skin is smooth again, my hair is getting more luster, my thoughts are crystal clear, I have no energy dips anymore. Like I mentioned, my appetite is great again, I am more resistant to stress, and my quality of sleep improved. With that being said, this went far better than expected. Iodine is an extremely vital nutrient for optimal health, and it is not something you can exactly get enough of simply by eating beef all day. Also, if you eat a lot of sugar, such as on a vegan diet, it is my assumption that you will deplete more of this mineral, and your requirements will be higher. And even if that wouldn't be the case, then the increase of goitrogens found in foods such as soy or cruciferous vegetables will decrease the absorption of the tiny bit of iodine that is offered by most vegan diets without supplementation. This, according to my hypothesis, is one of the main reasons why vegans fail on their diet, develop weight loss or weight gain, lack of youth mentally and physically, and it's why a low-carb diet can potentially cover up these problems. At least for a while, that is. And I think that most people that start doing a carnivore diet because they can't handle fruits or vegetables start doing that because they have a thyroid issue. They have an unresolved problem, which for the record they are not going to fix on their new diet. All the longest living populations on Earth are all coastal people, who usually enjoy seaweed, produce grown on soil near the coast, which I expect to be higher in iodine, and of course fish as well. Their longevity is not inherently related to their consumption or lack of consumption of animal products. It's related to consuming foods that are higher in vital minerals, especially iodine and zinc. But isn't iodine found in salt? Well, it depends. It is never naturally found in high quantities and it needs to be added. This also means sea salt is not a sufficient source. However, currently many manufacturers do no longer add iodine to their salt. And in many cases it's no longer found in bread either. And even if it is found in salt, the amount that is added is usually not enough to prevent a deficiency. Take this iodized tastemaker for example. 100 grams of this has 400% of the daily recommended intake for iodine. That would mean that you'd have to eat about 25 grams a day to get a sufficient amount of iodine in your diet. Far more likely is that the average person will consume about 4 to 8 grams of this a day. And even if you'd eat 25 grams of salt a day, which you shouldn't do, it would only be enough to prevent severe deficiency. Do realize that the number 150 micrograms a day is said to prevent goiter. It has nothing to do with optimal amounts. It's too soon to say, but I think the optimal amount for adults is closer to 300 micrograms. In that range it's unlikely to cause hyperthyroidism and it's enough for you to build up an actual buffer. There are some notions where people recommend several milligrams for optimal health, and as of now, I do not support these ideas. Of course, some amounts of iodine will always be found in the foods that we eat, but which one could we consume to ensure that we get enough? When it comes to iodine, do not just take a list from the internet as a reliable source of which foods you should consume to ensure you get enough, as these are very inconsistent. I have even seen lists that give up romaine lettuce as a reliable source. Thus you have to research these things for yourself. And if you want to be on the safe side, I highly recommend supplementation to ensure you hit at least your bare minimum. Remember, this is not something you want to play around with. The inconsistency with these lists comes from the fact that iodine content in basically all food sources differ largely from region to region. So while in some areas quite large amounts of the mineral can be found in a small amount of shrimps, in the Western world, shrimp is an average source at best. So while you'd usually expect fish to be high in the mineral, in some areas, like the Western world, you'd require at least 2 pounds of certain fish daily to ensure your basic needs. This is why so many carnivores recover poorly on their diet, and why I didn't even require animal foods to improve my health so drastically. As for sources not offering a consistent amount, the same goes for salt. Depending on who manufactures the salt, it might be a poor, adequate, or deplete source of iodine. Potatoes are another example of this. Potatoes are often given up as a great source of the mineral. However, Ireland is known for its hypothyroid epidemic. This while the Irish sure eat their potatoes. The bottom line is that these things are largely dependent on several factors, but mostly on region. Milk is another one carnivores love to bring up. The iodine content in milk is dependent on the feed of the cattle and the type of disinfectants used for milk storage tanks. Inherently, milk is likely not a rich source unless the animal would have grazed on land near the coast. Grass by itself is not necessarily a rich source of the mineral, so it's hard to say that milk is a reliable natural source. It is also debatable if the iodine that's added to the milk through disinfectants is the type of iodine you want building up in your thyroid. It is safe to say that most of us cannot rely on fish, dairy, or any animal product for our iodine needs. And if you don't believe that, realize this. In the Netherlands, we love dairy and fish. Okay? We are truly a fish, cheese, and potato country. So you'd think iodine deficiency is rare here, right? Well, in all of Europe, about 60% of us are deficient in the mineral, and the Netherlands is no exception. You will find more people that have thyroid issues than those that don't. Despite our amazing life expectancy, despite our high dairy, fish and bread intake, these things have not sufficiently aided us in reaching our iodine needs. So I'd argue that you're better off supplementing this one thing, regardless what diet you follow. But then how did people get enough iodine before civilization? I mean, surely humans are not made to be deficient, right? Indigenous people often rely on fish and seaweed. It is therefore likely that they meet their needs. If you'd consume all your food from the coast, it is my assumption you'll have plenty of iodine in your system and deficiency is rare. Getting too much is actually more likely. However, since most of us cannot assure where our food is grown or raised, it is better to supplement. But here's what I want to bring home. You can do poorly on any diet, and it might very well not be the diet's fault. I say, if you want to ensure you do a diet properly, the first thing you need to ensure is that you hit your mineral and vitamin needs. If you don't, and you don't take the effort to check these things, then sorry, not sorry, but we are well in our right to point out that you are doing your diet wrong. Call it dogma all you want, but as long as you don't grasp this concept, as long as you don't want to take the effort to check these things, your essentials, you'll keep up making the same mistake on any diet. And I'll say this, I'm not biased, so here's the thing, if you do the carnivore diet, and any diet that is not vegan, and you don't supplement iodine or you don't consume your 2 pounds of fish, guess what? You are still doing your diet wrong and you're not fixing your problems. Signs of so-called starvation can be caused by the lack of a single nutrient, which is not in any way inherent to animal food consumption. But wait, I hear you ask, does an increase in iodine not increase metabolism and therefore improve weight loss? How is it possible that you, machismo, gained weight? That's a fair question, but it's a misconception that insufficient iodine will always lead to weight gain and more iodine will always lead to weight loss. What can happen, for example, is this. Low levels of iodine can lead to suppressed hunger. For me, this led to a decrease in calorie intake. It also led to lower energy, which means that I wasn't able to work out as much as I wanted to. This in time led to weight loss. It's actually very common for people that who start ingesting more iodine in their diet suddenly gain weight and fat because they start eating a lot more food, which is the opposite of what they usually expect. Bottom line is, the metabolism of iodine and its effects on the body can be very unpredictable. It can even worsen symptoms of problems like anxiety and digestive issues before they become regulated. This leaves one question. Why particularly potassium iodine drops? Why not take another supplement? For some reason that I don't understand, things like kelp tablets can cause thyroid issues, even at low doses. Potassium iodine drops is the only supplement I know of for now that does not cause long-term negative effects. It's very cheap, very effective, and there's really no reason to not choose this one. And with that, end-stage veganism, vegan malnourishment, it's largely debunked, people. Have a nice day. This was Machismo. I'm signing off. See you next time.